Coming up this week on the This Lifestyle Show 887, Gary and Richard here, and we've got lots to catch up on. Talk about converting old media to new media, again, and whether AI could help out with some of that conversion. We've got some EV chat news, we've got new builds of Windows 11, I've got some music stuff, we've got all sorts, so let's get straight to Richard and to Gary. Gary, Richard, good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Before we start, Gary, you had a few answers to questions we talked about last week.
Yes, well, I can change a plug, so that's good.
That's good.
I've actually wired up plugs left, right, and centre. I've even wired up my own smart plug connections as well.
Because you were trained on changing plugs on ticker tape machines and things, and
Oh wow, yes, you made way back.
and card readers,
Bakelite, those Bakelite
punch cards.
plugs, yeah.
Yeah. Let me give you some front light so my face gets a little bit green light. That's a bit weird. I don't think I want green light. Let's do something a bit better than that. The other question I was going to answer was your question about standard 8 film, Ian.
Yeah.
So standard 8 was actually 16 frames per second. When Super 8 came along, it was 18 frames per second, and if you actually had 16 mil, that was commonly 24 frames per second.
Right.
Which is interesting.
Well, actually, I thought, I found these reels ready to go. I don't know how it's the 400. I think the 400 foot. Are they or whatever? I can't remember what they are. But anyway, let me just check. I got the reels and I looked online, and yeah, the 400 foot reels. So there's two of them. I don't know how much has been edited out. So the maximum they could be would be 400 feet each. So I found a couple of online ones. I think it's worked out as £40 per 400 foot reel plus £8 for some media. So that seems £84. That seems fairly reasonable. But I thought I would try and support my high street, and I'll go and see. I was in Chile, near where I live. So I thought, while I'm there, I saw there was a Max Spielman's. I thought, well, I used to get my pictures developed there.
To Max Filmans, yeah.
Yeah. So I thought, well, I'll give them a chance because, like I said, support the high street stores. And so I went in and they flicked away with the book for a while and said, that'll be £240. I thought, £240? Buy the machine for £240. I think we discussed last week. I checked the £248, I think, on Amazon. I could then eBay. But anyway, I'm going to use the online one where they do a courier and a track courier and everything, because they send it away. Max Spielman's would only send it away as well. So whether the person in the shop got it wrong, I don't think she did, because she had a book with the calc, and I think she had a price per foot, 800 foot. There's £240. So. Yeah. It's a lot. Yeah, it just seemed perhaps it's not a request to get very often. So so I won't be sending it to them. I will be using one of the online services, I think. And there's no audio on them anyways, as we kind of surmised last week.
No, not standard 8. So sound really came from Super 8. Although there were variants of standard 8 which got sound strips on them, magnetic strips eventually, but primarily Super 8 which had the sound on.
Yeah,
and as I mentioned the other week, there was also single 8 as well, which was Fuji's thinner film, which was actually quite an interesting concept because you could get more on the reel, and they had the key thing with that, which was great for a young aspiring filmmaker like myself, was you could rewind the film and do over double exposures, so you could do all the special effects of people disappearing and reappearing and all that stuff. And they get very creative, but it was fun.
Well, I did look through some of the initial frames, and I can see some titles on it. So it looks like my grandfather put titles on. So I guess he must have filmed. I'm not sure how he got the titles on. I think the old way was just to film a title board, wasn't it?
Yeah, you filmed the title board. Yeah, you did that, or you double exposed, and then that was actually something you could do. You could even with standard 8, you could actually definitely do it, because you could wind back on the reels because it's reel to reel mainly on the cameras. Both Super 8 and Single 8 were cartridge format, so you had less control over them. Super 8 particularly had less control over, but that was meant as sort of like a consumer format, not your hobbyist, not your sort of cameraman type hobbyist. But Standard 8 you could rewind, and lots of hobbyist cameramen would have done that sort of double exposure thing. So, and then used a title board, a white on black usually title board to get the.
I can vaguely remember as being a small child having the stick-on letters and playing with those as a kid, sticking them on things. I can vaguely remember that. So That was probably after he stopped using it, and they were just in a drawer somewhere. And as a kid, I used to be allowed to play with them. So I can't remember those like white letters, I think they were, or something that you stuck on the cards. So yeah. Well, I'm going to send them away anyway, and hopefully I'll get something back, and I'll be able to interested to see what they are. But I know the Morecambe 1964, and I think it's Morecambe 64 and somewhat Scarborough 1964 as well. So yes, the sights of Scarborough from 1960s. So we'll see. Interesting. While I was up in the loft, I did get my old Canon camera out, which is a little bit more recent. I haven't used this for a while. This is a Canon MiniDV. So I've got the tapes on there, and I thought, oh, this has got my lads on when they were babies, because I did this. But I've actually got these already transferred to a VHS cassette, because I edited them and did them at the time, which I can't play the VHS one, but I do know some with the VHS, so I can do that. But my thing, the tape player, is not working. You put the tape in, it just chews the tape for a bit and comes up with an error. So that's probably beyond my technical expertise to fix this. I'm going to do the usual thing and take it apart and clean it all, but it's
probably the drive belt.
Yeah.
So anything from the late sort of mid 80s onwards, the drive belt rubber tends to deteriorate very quickly.
Yeah, this is I think I bought this in because I bought it when my lads were born, so 2002. This is, but so I've got all the cables and everything and charger and everything. It's just I put the tape in, and I managed to get the tape out. These little cassettes like that.
Yeah, I've got some of those lying around somewhere.
Yeah,
I remember those.
And it's amazing how quickly that was replaced by. I think I used the flip. Probably the flip camera was what came next after that, and then or maybe my proper Canon camera, which has got video mode on it. But yeah, it just shows you don't transfer these things, you can lose them. But like I said, I have got a VHS of them, which I could convert that if I wanted to as well. But maybe I'll do. The lads are coming up to 21, so maybe that would be a good project for do. But I was hoping to get them off the tape roll.
I mean, what could also be interesting is once you've got that footage in a digital format, is to see what you can do with it in terms of AI. I mean, there's at risk of being quite nerdy about space stuff, they're doing some astonishing things with some of the old 12 frame per second stuff from Apollo these days.
I see, yeah.
And it just looks amazing. It looks sort of. I mean, I was just looking this week at some of the footage from the rovers from Apollo 16, which was all 12 frames per second, because they just ran the cameras, and it's now been obviously upscaled and now changed, so it's in real. It moves in correct time at 60 frames per second. Then it's just astonishing. So you might give all that footage a whole new lease of life.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah, because the like we talked about a few weeks ago with the Peter Jackson World War One.
Yes,
it goes from being a grainy historical thing to being real people when you get it in the right frame rate and everything. So yeah, but is that the kind of thing that regular people can get access to? Like, is there an Azure process engine on that, or is how?
Yeah, you're anything if you're you're not a regular person. I'm sure you can work it out. I'm sure you do. You'll get this raw footage and do some amazing stuff with it, definitely. And I bet there'll be an Azure service.
Yeah,
although I don't know if you guys have seen the Cat GPT AI service, which is quite amusing, where you basically ask a cat questions and it responds with meows.
Does it? Can you at least get on that one? Because most of the time the chat one is the Chat GPT is oversubscribed. Is the cat one available?
I think last time I tried it was, yes, but
yes, it's highly subscribed.
It's about as useful as talking to a cat.
Yeah.
Is me not got your Azure AI subscription set up and doing it that way?
Yeah, well, I could do that now, can't I? I've got the subscription. Yeah, I was just going through the public service, but so with your Azure, you can get an instance of that now, can you?
Yeah, you can do. Yeah, it's all being integrated. I'm not sure it's fully rolled out yet, but that's certainly the intention that it's going to be rolled out as part of Azure AI. Which, yeah.
And then you can put your own chatbot front end to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there you go. So that might be my route to doing the to do the AV restorations. And certainly that's a good idea, that, though, Richard. Once you get into digital format, then you can experiment and mess about and try different things with it, can't you?
Definitely. Yeah, modern tools to today are just astonishing. Of course, it's one of the benefits of the AI stuff. Although you have to be careful that it doesn't make up too much stuff in between frames. But I think it's giving old footage really a new lease of life. I mean, and I think Peter Jackson did lead the way with both. I think the World War I in color, which is still astonishing, and I bang on about it a lot, but it's just worthwhile everyone watching it because it's just astonishing to watch this stuff. Thinking that it's well over 100 years old, and it's just amazing. But even more recent things that have come out are just it's the tech is that I think is a really good use of the tech. I'm less keen on I think, as we've discussed, some of the issues around AI being used to write articles and things, and which perhaps or essays, which I think it's getting ethically iffy then. But I think using it as a tool, the same way you would use any enhancement tool, I think is great. And I've been really impressed with what I've seen visually so far. Less impressed, if I'm honest, with some of the writing that's come out of it, especially some of the publications that shall remain nameless that haven't given credit or admitted that it's been done until they've been found out, it seems. But we'll leave that alone.
Yeah. I've been doing some audio restoration of my cassettes. I haven't found anything really that interesting apart from me and my sister arguing, but I did. So I could play it to it. I did clean it up, and I didn't really use any AI as such, but I did use some of the mastering plugins, the VST mastering plugins that you can get to automatically enhance the sound quality and reduce the hiss and whatever. So that's just on a simple consumer level that you can get that stuff. But the video stuff.
And was that the one where you also added the "I told you so" prefix or a suffix? Or
yes. Yeah, this is where I've made a little plaque and give it to my sister. Yeah, I told you it was. I told you. It only took 40 years to settle the argument, but yeah, it's finally settled in my favour. Which now, of course, I'm using for other points that I was right all along. And although I don't have the evidence to go with that, this is obviously proof that I was always right. So, job done. So yeah, so I think she's really pleased I found that. Yeah, I'm going to go check that. So anyway, I'll send my 8mm off and then have a look at those. As for the DV, I'll have a look at the belt on it, Gary. I think that was what I suspected. It would be something like that. But taking apart my big denim player was easy. It's got big screws on it and things like that. Taking things apart is a lot more delicate. So
challenging.
Yes.
So nice.
But give it a spray of the silicone cleaner that I've got. That's usually my first job, and if that doesn't work, then I'll have to take it apart. So I think that's all my audio restoration stuff and stuff I found out of my loft now, because my loft shelves are in now. Which if I ever do a DIY podcast, that'll be one of my special episodes for loft shelves. I'm quite proud of those. I've been showing them off. People aren't very interested in the rest of the house, but I've been showing them off. What else? So in terms of this week, there's not a huge amount of news, but we did get some builds. Gary, we can catch up on some EV news. I did see something just related to the before we took builds to a topic we talked about last week with Microsoft and their mixed reality team. Well, effectively gone, hasn't it now? The MR toolkit, even the dev relations team on the mixed reality. I think, do you remember Jesse McCurk that was on the show?
Mm-hmm.
I think he's gone to finding pastures new now as well. So I think all that team has gone now, which is a real shame. But what I did see is that according to Bloomberg, Sony have halved its projections for the PlayStation 2 VR2 headset. So I think they were going to order 2 million, and now they're only ordering 1 million of those because of their pre-order forecasts, or what the amount they've had pre-ordered. So it's not just Microsoft. The whole VR thing is still a niche, but it's not really gone mainstream as we hoped it would probably
really
be.
Unfortunately, I mean, I think it's great for training. I think there's a lot of applications around industry, but I think as a consumer device, unfortunately, as we keep saying, if it didn't happen in the last 3 years, it wasn't going to happen. Unfortunately.
Yeah.
Next time, never mind. We'll just have to wait for the generations to come around again, like 3D in cinemas.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Well, actually, you know what I did watch, because it took a VR and I came across on Disney. I watched Lawnmower Man.
Ah, that's great. That is.
Yeah, the 1990, was it 1990? I think it was, wasn't it?
It's is it Pierce Brosnan and Jeff
Yes.
Fye? I think Jeff Fye,
Yeah.
who is trying to think, has Jeff Fye ever been in a good film? Anyway, and Lawnmower Man, not a good film.
Yeah. So for anybody that's not why we're talking about Lawnmower Man, it's a VR film. I mean, it's a Stephen. No, I forgot the author's name now. Was it Stephen King? Was it? No, I forgot the author's name now. But
I mean, it's a great concept.
Really the title was borrowed.
Story.
Yeah, I think I was reading about it. The original title was Cyber God or something like that. But yeah, effectively, it's a guy that's challenged, and he's a lawnmower guy. He just does the lawnmower. Yeah, and he gets injected with sort of these serums and gets into the VR, but it's the full VR, the full rotating thing, isn't it? With you can sort of 360 spin round and all that, and giant VR headsets and everything. It really showed. But when you look at it, actually, the graphics in it are really advanced. Well, I think I read it took months and months to do the VR rendering, because obviously it's not like now, is it, where you can just render it on your laptop. It was real high processing time, and it looks really good, actually. For it's a period piece now, but it looks great.
So the title actually come from Stephen King, not a novel, but it was a story, basically. Yeah.
It's a good film. If anybody wants to, if you've never seen it and you want to look back at what we thought VR would be in the future in the 90s, then this is what we thought it would be. And the graphics are actually pretty good, but it's kind of got that VR. If you ever looked at Mike Oldfield did a VR thing in the early 2000s thing, got a very similar feel to it, and Jan Hammer did a VR album in around that time, which used some of the same technology and things like that's called Beyond Mind's Eye, which is pretty good. But yeah, it was good. So a good historical film. There is a sequel to it apparently, but it's supposed to be really bad. But I've never seen it, but it is on Disney.
The first one, crikey, yeah. I mean, that's something, the first one, the Lawnmower Man film. I mean, it was groundbreaking for its time, but it does look a bit. I mean, yeah, it does look a bit iffy these days, if I'm honest. It's not like, say, a Tron, which is quite cute and quaint in many ways. It's actually quite. It does look. It reminds me, how music will often date a film, and you have obviously orchestral stuff never seems to actually date, but occasionally you'll have some synths and things. 80s, early 90s, and yeah, the visuals in that, while very impressive for the time, I think 30 years on, have not aged well. As I say, I mean, I actually bizarrely watched Tron and the Tron reboot, not reboot, what's it called?
Legacy.
Tron Legacy. I watched both those last week, and Tron, it's just amusing, really. Tron's quite it's an interesting period piece, whereas Tron Legacy. Yeah.
They're doing a third one, aren't they, now as well? I think they've announced that.
Are they really?
Oh,
right, okay. I've been thinking. I mean, hopefully they'll manage to do a de-aged version of Jeff Bridges without looking quite so strange.
I thought that. It's not that long since I've seen it, but it does look a bit strange, and is the that again dates it to that time, doesn't it, when they're using that DA? It gets away with it because it is all computer generated, so it's not like it was in a real setting, so it's not quite as bad. It's not as good as a story as the original Tron. I think that's probably
not at all. No, it's but there's so many Easter eggs in it, though. Look, I mean, watching it now, when he sort of boots up the old machine from the 80s, you think, oh yeah, I recognise all that. There we go. Yes. Oh, Solaris. Oh yes, now we're talking. So
yeah, that's it. Yeah.
So I mean, that's another good, another good example of CCTV films. Yes, Lawnmower Man was the one we had the full-on immersive helmet and things. It was interesting film that.
Yeah, it was. And it also reminds there was another film at a similar time, and I can't remember what it was called now. Disclosure or something like that. Michael Douglas in it, I think, where it was kind of a whodunit or murder type thriller, and then they tacked on a lot of VR stuff at the end of it. I'll find that for next week. But yeah, they're supposed to be in a database, and you walk around a database, and some reason that never took off your virtual database that you walk around. You still have to use SQL query strings on it, but maybe one day.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, tech may move on, but my SQL skills always seem to be in demand. It's great.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not really changed much.
Yeah, exactly. Right, so moving on to some new technology. We're back to Windows, where we did get some builds last week, and these builds are not got a lot of new features in, but we did get a couple of bits in it, and one was build 25284 for the dev channel. Had a messenger widget. Are you excited for the messenger widget?
No. Didn't we have that sort of thing on Windows Phone? I'm just
Well, yes, we used to have the messages live tile where you could have your Twitter and everything all linked in.
Exactly, which worked really well, and it's like, we appear to be making. Although I just want to point out 25284, which is a dev channel build, ARM 64 devices. Again, it's broken for.
Oh, and actually, after last week, I said no, you mixed up. They fixed that bug. You were referring to a bug that they hadn't announced.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yes. So yes, you were absolutely right. The bug that you encountered was the one that they announced in the notes last Thursday.
Well, as I said, Dev Channel is going nowhere near my unbox because it is just so flaky. It's just so many bugs right now.
Yeah.
But the bug I encountered, which they've logged in the Dev Channel, I'm getting that in production. So
yeah.
As I say, at some point we'll have a more of a long-term thing in this ARM device. But I've gone from thinking this is great to thinking, consumers wouldn't like this very much.
Yeah. It wasn't very exciting to build, apart from you won't get it on ARM, and you got the Messenger widget. If you do use Messenger, I suppose it's fairly useful.
Oh yes, I use Messenger quite a lot. It's but I don't really see the need for that, to be honest. Widgets full stop I'm not that bothered about, but it's a neat feature. But I think what was more interesting, I think you mentioned the phone link stuff in one of the
so it was actually in this build, if you had it, but it wasn't in the release notes, so maybe they'll talk about that on the build that comes out this week. But it's on 25284. Just make sure you've got the latest version of a phone link installed, and then you will get phone link in as a widget, which I actually find pretty useful because you can look at notifications on there. You can see your phone's status. Or maybe I should share my.
But it's still screen. Only Android, isn't it?
Yes, yeah. Phone link. I know this upsets a lot of people that are iPhone users.
I've got both, but it would be nice. Gary. From a dev standpoint, what's the issue here? Because it's phone link, which obviously had a different name in the past, is great for Android phones. It'd be really nice if some of this stuff would come out for the iPhone as well. So what's the issue?
Quite a lot of development time to do it. Apple locks down a lot of the stuff that you'd actually want to be able to do to make it work. So Microsoft would have to get some agreements from Apple to actually let them do it. I think that's probably the biggest challenge, to be honest. There's stuff in there which is not easy to do on an iPhone because of the way they lock down the APIs and things. And of course, Microsoft have a very good relationship with Samsung on this. This is co-developed with Samsung, so it's they get a lot of inside help for the Android world, which I doubt that they get quite so much from Apple. So Apple ought to really help Microsoft out, since Microsoft did save them right back in the day.
You're going back a bit there now. I found it quite useful because you can view your battery level and your signal status, and like I said, you can see your notifications. You click on them and it opens the app up. I must admit, the only time I really see widgets is when I accidentally click on the widget box. That's most of the time. It's not. I haven't deliberately done it, but. I think that's probably the most useful one yet. I'm not really bothered about cricket scores or entertainment news, but having your phone widget one, maybe your Teams calendar or something like that would be more useful. I don't think there's any Teams ones in there. I know there's an Outlook one, but I think probably more Microsoft and more Windows services would be better in there. That's probably I don't really need to get my news feeds from it, but Yeah, maybe there was more system information like that. Maybe if you have one that showed, disk space and or network status or something like that, that would actually probably be more useful than all the other bits.
Or maybe they could just not develop any more widgets and make it work on under ARM. Just saying.
Yeah.
Yep.
But so that was it. So that was the build from last week. The dev build. There was a beta build, wasn't there? I think two beta builds. The usual one, features, no features. But
yes, I mean, I think beta, the main change there. I mean, there were some fixes and things around task manager and what have you. I think the main thing in the beta builds is the screen recording and snipping.
Yeah.
Which is quite useful if you're again taking shots of things. I mean, there's many third-party apps out there that can do this already, but it's quite handy to have it built in, because the snipping tool is actually a really useful is really useful function. So having a screen recording will be useful. So I guess it's getting closer to being released.
Yes, yeah, I'm sure that'll just pop up just in the general builds at some point in the future.
Yeah.
The other update as well, last week I did get an update for Surface Duo, but that was just the Android security updates. I'm probably not expecting too many updates for this now. This is the Duo range, as it looks like there isn't going to be a Duo 3, so we'll just get the Android security updates. I can't see them spending a lot of time on adding new features, or even Android 13. They might not even do that. I don't know. I've not heard anything, but it does seem like a cul-de-sac for development, so I wouldn't be surprised if they spend too much resources on bringing new things to it. They'll just maintain it.
Yeah,
that sounds familiar.
Yes, it does.
It's a Microsoft project. The product that sounds very familiar.
It's a real shame. I mean, the Duo is, again, it wasn't for me, but I did like the approach that they took with it. But yeah, it does feel like it's kind of going the same way, doesn't it? Just
yeah, it definitely does. Yeah, I think if it doesn't run Windows, then I don't think it. Well, I suppose Xbox kind of run Windows, doesn't it? But Xbox manages okay, isn't it? But because that's its own thing, Windows and Surface, it does okay. But I think there's somebody saying that they thought that maybe the Surface line would be chopped by these recent layoffs. But I'd be surprised if that was the case, because it is quite a good money making business that now, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, yes, it's not a huge amount of money in terms of how much in terms of how much Microsoft makes, but I've always felt the Surface line was a good way for Microsoft to say this is how you should make laptops, how you should make things.
Yeah, it solves the issues they were having with same coming up before, and I think that what I've seen the layoffs, that team seems to have survived, the actual hardware team. So I think that's probably not going to be the case.
I mean, the layoffs. I think we'll see the fallout from the layoffs in the coming months or so, next 6 to 12 months. Just keep an eye on various projects and see how they keep moving, because I know of a few people at Microsoft who I'm quite familiar with who have been laid off, and they were involved in some fairly, I wouldn't say higher profile, but some interesting projects that are I've been to see if they proceed at Microsoft, really. And that's just, and I just want to emphasize that's not just Microsoft. I mean, I think Google as well, particularly around open source. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens going forwards, because these companies are obviously scaling things back. I'm not going to get into the rights and wrongs of the situation. Just again, my heart goes out to those engineers who work very hard and who now being affected by these layoffs, which don't seem to be driven particularly by technical needs, more by other motives. Anyway, I'll be quiet now.
Yeah. I did another. So I did the build videos for those. I did do one other video last week, mainly because it was just something that I had to sort of figure out how to use, and then I thought, I'll record a video on it. It's slightly esoteric, but a few months ago, I did some videos on the VST, the virtual versions of the Korg software, which I got, and they've got a vocoder in there in one of the tools. So the vocoder is Mr. Blue Sky, the electronic voice that's on that. It's a great effect. I love it. I drive the kids mad with it every now and again. And I've actually got one over there, but there's a virtual one, and it works slightly differently than the rest of all the virtual instruments. So I did do a video on that. So all you need is an audio interface. It's like a laptop would do it, and a microphone, and you can do it with one of these headsets on here, so you can vocode it to your heart's content. So I've shown you how to do that. So I've got a video of that. I've done another couple of how-to videos, one on power management this week as well. So I'm hoping those little snippet videos help some people with their stuff. I had some fun actually playing around. I was doing some sampling this week as well. Because the Korg synth, I got the mod wave one, as well as being a wavetable synthesizer. It plays samples. This is the one, the Raspberry Pi powered one under the hood, and it plays samples. And they have a nice tool for converting those and making them to multi samples and sending them down. So I tried being experimenting, sampling some of my old instruments. So I've got a Yamaha TX7 up there, which is a 1983 DX7 rack. So it's a little box. So I got some sounds off that, recorded that, put them into, converted to wave files, run through the sample editor, move them over to the mod wave, and then I can then play them through all the various effects that you can get on there. And I've got some really interesting effects with it actually. So I've enjoyed playing that. I went down a rabbit hole of creating 1983 Tangerine Dream sounds. Which I had great fun doing. Nobody else in the house really that keen on my Tangerine Dream collection, but
then they're fools. Tangerine Dream's magnificent.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So, Tangerine Dream, fantastic German electronic music band from the 70s. Some amazing 70s stuff, which is really psychedelic and really out there. In the 80s, they went very digital with the new wave of sounds coming through the digital synths, and that's pretty much what I've been recreating. So new project that I'm going to be doing, I'm doing some tracks based on these sort of early digital electronic sounds. So a lot of the previous stuff I've done, I've been using the analog synths to get that sort of analog synth sound, and I'm now moving into this digital phase. So, and by sampling my own things, I've then sort of using that sort of technique that Tangerine Dream would use to make monophonic sounds, polyphonic and that kind of thing, and sampling. So yeah, I'm having good fun on that. I really love explaining it to the rest of the family what I've been doing. They find it fascinating, I'm sure. Listen to this. I have picked up quite a few of the Tangerine Dream vinyls as well. So I've been that's my latest. When I go vinyl hunting now, that's what I'm picking up, all of these late 70s, early 80s ones, because a lot of them were on Virgin Records, the 70s ones and the early 80s ones. So they're the ones to get. So I quite enjoyed getting them. So yeah, so that's a lot of do some synthesis work from my next collection of songs, because I've just published. So by the time this show airs, it should be available on Amazon, iTunes, and Spotify, and the usual places. My new selection of songs, and the title is called Machine Gateway, and it's 11 songs. In fact, I can share what the Spotify screen will look like. So it's 11 new tracks, some tech related. So there's the Machine Gateway, some tech. You see a track called Endpoint, and a few other bits and pieces that you'll see in there. All recorded here, and various styles, all electronic music, a bit more perhaps rock than the last one. Last one was very synth pop. This is a bit more, it's got some actual acoustic drums in there, or samples of acoustic drums, and some other stuff. So yeah, have a listen to that when it comes out. I'll put a link in the show notes. So so that's this collection done, and I'm on to my next one. Incidentally, the cover art on there as well is AI generated.
I thought it was.
Which is funny, isn't it? Because that's going to really date these covers, isn't it? So which I'm quite happy with. But it's the same as when something new comes out and you look at any people use these technologies like the AI generated images like that. In a few years' time, that they are going to be very much of this era, aren't they? Of that style, because it's going to become out of style, isn't it? As it becomes passe and whatever. But yeah, so it does take that, but then that's fine. Me, I'm quite happy with that. So yeah, so have a listen to those. Some upbeat ones, some more mellow ones, some samples that I've taken from when I've been out and about as well, some rain effects and things like that. So I've quite enjoyed doing that. So onto the next project now. I did find a couple of my old tapes as well from the 80s as well, of late 80s, I think, of me playing around, but I don't think they're quite ready for they're not quite release standard. So me playing on my Yamaha DX100 in the late 80s. Right, moving on. So Gary, I wanted to catch up on you on the EV stuff. I think we discussed last week. I'm halfway through my lease at the moment, so I'm not quite ready to go, but I'm at that stage where I'm starting to think about, the next car, what that'll be. Do I do another lease or do I buy or whatever? So I'm just starting to look at the options. And we talked last week, Richard and I, about the MG, because I was going through different manufacturers, looking just at list prices initially before I got anywhere else. And big difference between the list price of the MG for what you get and a lot of the other manufacturers.
Yeah, indeed, and it's amazing what the pet company of MG can produce. SAIC, Shanghai Automobile Company, and they've got a few other car makes throughout the world, and they tend to bring a lot of those into the UK as MG. They've also got a van manufacturer, which is slightly different, but similar technology. MG4 was the first one on their new modular platform. As Richard rightly said last week, it's the first one they've built from the ground up as an EV, and it shows, and they're certainly very good. There's going to be other vehicles coming on that platform, and the next generation of the ZS EV, which will be a couple of years out, I guess, because they're going to just put the new one out, will be on that platform as well. And probably most exciting for a lot of people is they're actually going to do a sports car, a convertible, on that platform as well, based on the historic MG.
Right, yeah,
So they called the MGC, which looks quite good actually from what I'm seeing. But that'd be basically an MG4 underpinnings, so that they can use the same technology they've got in the MG4.
Can't call it an MGC. Oh, the purists will be upset about that. I mean, they'll be saying, "Where's my big straight six engine?" No, it's electric.
I'll have a straight six battery. That'll be fine. I mean, it's going to be. I suspect it'll be quite a nice vehicle, and it'll be one of the first convertibles out there which would be electric. So that could give them route to market. I can't see that being down on the low end of the price packet though. I think they'll probably push that up. The new MG5 will be based on that as well. I mean, they've obviously only just released the new MG5, which is a lot better, probably than the one you drove, Richard. I think that was definitely improved.
Yeah, I mean, the 4 was great. I thought the 4 was actually a very good car, to be honest. The larger one, which I guess the MG5 is going to be replacing I can't remember what they're called, the larger ones.
Well, there's ZS EV, the HS, which is actually hybrid. But there's also a couple of others which are only in Europe at the moment, which I think will come over here, again based on the platform. So that there's quite a few. I think if you look at their model range coming out, it's going to be quite interesting. That there's going to be a few things to choose from. Obviously, it's slightly more priced. MG4 Pro is a great car for the money, though. It really is. And certainly the long range one is a very adequate car for a lot of people. And the build quality is up there. I mean, the interesting thing is, I think a lot of people think the build quality is going to be down because it's an MG, and then they start picking on things. And then you actually compare it with, say, as you did, the ID3. You look at some of the build quality of that; it's equally as quality in some cases.
Yeah, so, it's fascinating to sort of see how Volkswagen and some of the other similar high-end manufacturers have almost like dialed down the build, the quality of finish and plastics they're using, while the likes of MG have dialed it up. It's interesting. Yeah. I do wonder if the electric vehicle is going to mark a turning point, just not for not just for power sources, but also for manufacturers full stop, because of manufacturers like Volkswagen and other similar high-end brands have had the market really to themselves, and they think, well, if you're looking for a whole new generation of car, you should perhaps start looking elsewhere.
Yeah, and there's a few other people into market as well in the next few months. Suzuki have announced a whole range of EVs, which will be, again, fairly low price, because that's Suzuki's route to market. But their recent cars have been pretty well built, so I suspect that they'll be another competitor in the market. So, and you mentioned Kia last week, which is obviously changed its view. I mean, if you've actually seen the prices they're quoting for their next generation of EVs, they're going up market, which is interesting. But in some areas of the world, Kia is seen as a high end brand. So it's an interesting how this stuff can be driven.
And there's nothing wrong with them at all. It's again, I was compared to the last time I looked at the vehicles, I was thinking about really how good these all were. It's like, well, it's actually a really nice vehicle, nice place to be. The Kia was. I was disappointed, I think, with the likes of Volkswagen and other German electric makers, because I was expecting perhaps too much. Maybe, I don't know.
It's difficult. I mean, some of the new BMW EVs are actually quite good.
But they're very expensive.
Very premium price.
It's the premium price.
Very expensive.
And it doesn't justify it. I look at, because we've got an MG ZS EV new gen in the family, and we've obviously got the Kia EV6, which I drive. And when I switch between the two cars, there's not £30,000 worth of difference in cost between them in terms of quality. There just isn't. They have very similar ranges. They drive very similarly, because electric cars do. So a lot of it's down to the technology, to the comfort, to all those sort of things you get with them. And a lot of these manufacturers, certainly MG, are bringing all that in that low price range. So
and that's exactly right, because the only decision factors that's made us say go for the Kia over the MG4 has been purely the seating position for the driver, and that's been it. Oh, I would have gone for the MG4 every time. I really liked it. But it came down to purely a comfort choice. But the rest of it, it's so hard. There isn't 8,000, 10,000, 12,000 pounds worth of difference, and that's why I think a lot of the higher end manufacturers are going to come unstuck, because people like Ian, who are looking at the next car and thinking, actually, I could save a lot of money by going for this kind of car instead of the usual BMW, Mercedes, or what have you. And I wonder if there's a shake-up coming.
And for me, it's sorry, guys. I was going to say that for me, it's I look at the lease price, and for a petrol BMW, and then the lease price on an electric, it's just it's too much with a gap. There's too big a gap jump to fork out. Whereas if I looked at the MG, it's not that much different from what I'm paying now. And then I get the saving on the fuel and everything, so I can make it work really easily. Even though maybe over a long term, an EV BMW maybe work out better than a petrol EV. In the short term, it just looks a shock to your monthly payments. Whereas the MG and the other brands that are cheaper look better value on paper.
And MG is not the only disruptive brand. We've got a few disruptors starting to come into the market. I mean, there's the Aura Cat, which came in a bit more pricey than I expected it to, but it's a very nice vehicle for the money. There's Neo, which is starting to become to the market in this country, and they've now got they've signed up with their dealership network in the UK, which means that they're going to have quite a big presence, and they are the biggest EV company in the world outside that, close to passing Tesla, and their price market is price to market is incredibly competitive compared to BMW and everything else, and you get an awful lot of value for money. Biggest selling car in Norway, which says a lot when you consider Norway the biggest EV market. So there's a lot there that they have available coming now, which will disrupt. And I actually think Neo are probably going to be the biggest disruptor when they come to market, because they're very aggressive in every market they've gone into, and will offer these long-term warranties, like you spoke about last week, and a lot of other things as well, a lot of incentives to buy from them. And in Norway, they do some really aggressive finance deals as well to get people on leases and long term. And they're producing some pretty nice looking cars as well. if you have a look up the EP9 at some point from Neo. That's quite an interesting looking car.
And did you say they're coming to the UK?
They are, yeah. They've now signed up. So there was some talk. For a long time they said they weren't going to come to UK because they were only doing left-hand drive cars, but they've now started to do right-hand drive cars, and yeah, they're.
I think the name rings a bell. Were they on one of the? Did they have them in one of the Top Gears or something like that?
Yeah, they probably were on Top Gears at one stage. I mean, they certainly done some.
Yeah, I think it was on the fairly recent ones. Yeah.
But the EP9 is the one which keeps setting records on things like Nuremberg and stuff like that. It looks a bit like a McLaren to me. But yeah, they are. They've got a lot of models, and they've got models for all budgets and all sizes. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's worthwhile pointing out that when you see these wonderful speed tests and things at the Nuremberg ring, what have you, you've got to also bear in mind that a lot of the EV models, they do tend to plough through the charge really quickly when they tank around at great speed.
Yeah. But actually, the Neo ones. One of the things about Neo is their battery tech is probably ahead of most other.
Yeah.
So they got to get, and yes, it is it's a Chinese brand. I mean, there's some people for some really good reasons don't want to go with Chinese brands, and I get that, but they are going to be the disruptor. They're this century's Japan, basically. Market.
I mean, I think with all these EVs, I mean, there's I can't remember. It may have been a Top Gear type show, or maybe a Grand Tour type show, whatever. But yeah, the take was, the battle's over. Speed is EV. EVs are faster. There's no two ways around it. If you want performance, you'd buy a traditional engine because you like the sound of it. Because otherwise, it's going to always be beaten in a drag race by an EV. I mean, crikey, even European makers like is Rimac? Are they European? I can't remember if they are. Yeah, I mean that's insanely fast. Just insane.
Yeah. I think you're right. It was one. I think it was the previous Grand Tour. I think episode. I remember seeing that. There was kind of debates over now, isn't it? On that one,
it's over. It's over.
Yeah, it's what you want as a personal preference now, rather than a pure performance.
Yeah. And the other thing is that we are. I mean, battery tech has been talked about for a long while, and it's taken a lot longer to get to market than I thought it would. But there are challenges around it. But new battery tech is coming now, and there's stuff which will charge faster. The next generation of EVs will have a much faster charge rate. I mean, as I've said on a number of occasions, my car charges fast enough. I don't get time to get into the Starbucks queue at the services to get a cup of coffee before it's finished charging, and then I feel bad that I'm blocking a charger and I have to go back. So faster charging will come, longer range will come, longevity of the batteries will come as well. Although that's not actually really an issue. I mean, there's a lot of talk about that, and you have to replace your battery after 10,000 miles. That's never been the case. 100,000 miles. Most batteries outlast people's use of a car, to be honest. I think that reliability will come in, but that's coupled with the ability to fast charge. I mean, obviously, the faster you charge, the more heat you generate, which is the worst thing you can do for batteries. So, as these new types of anodes and things come into play, which will reduce dendrites of forming, which will reduce the risk of fire and the risk of heat usage, then that will be a problem, will be sorted. The other thing is that they're going to be much better in cold weather, which is one of the possibly Achilles heels of EVs, perceived Achilles heels of EVs, although it's not really that major an issue. Yes, you do get a range drop in winter. I mean, mine goes from about 280 to about 220 in winter. I think the worst I saw was 200 on a really cold day. But that's because it's anticipating you're going to use heating a lot more on cold days. But with the newer batteries, that'll potentially be less of a problem, and also colder weather charging will be less of a problem. So all this stuff will improve, and we still are in fairly early days of development. If you look at where electric cars are now compared to where 20 years in petrol cars were, the rate of development is astounding, and we will be seeing very impressive changes. What does need to change though is the quality control and maintenance of charging infrastructure.
I was just going to say, yeah. I mean, the issue is definitely now infrastructure. The cars themselves are fine. I think the cars are fine,
and it's not a lack of infrastructure. We've got a lot of infrastructure. The problem is a lot of it isn't working at the moment, and it's not being maintained because a lot of stuff was done. I mean, particularly the stuff in town centres, the council grant things was capital grants, and no money was then put aside for maintenance. And a lot of this, the early stuff which is installed, has proved not to be that reliable. And I think that's the biggest place where we have issues. That the quality of the charging equipment has not been what should have been expected. And part of that is the standard which BMW and Mercedes imposed on the world in CCS, which wasn't that well thought out, to be honest. So it could have been better. There's talk of a new CCS standard may improve on it, but at the moment CCS is ubiquitous. But we'll see. I think it's a long way. It's probably too difficult now to change away from CCS as the standard charging. No tester would like to. But yeah, there's I think things are improving though. I mean, we see there's been so many new chargers installed in the last 2-3 weeks. I mean, I've seen hubs appearing everywhere, because they've started to get the power supplies out to the sticks where they need them. So I mean, we've mentioned this before as well. The services are absolutely the worst place to have a charger because they tend to be in the middle of nowhere with very limited power supplies going to them, unlike cities would have.
I mean, one of my concerns about the charging infrastructure is, I mean, again, for me, I'm lucky enough to have a house, where I can park off street and use my domestic supply charger. It does seem to be getting more and more expensive to use. I mean, it's still less than fuel and petrol, but it does seem to be getting more expensive to use a charger.
Chargers out and about you, and I think that is an issue if you have to charge on the road. But with a 200-mile to 20-mile range car, a genuine 20-mile range car, you're driving for 3 hours before you have to charge. And in most cases, that gets you places in the UK. And it's not many places you can't get on that sort of journey.
Oh yeah, I mean, again, my maths has been just perhaps 3 occasions where we'd have to go more than 100 miles, because of course it's 200 miles, which is basically 100 miles there, 100 miles back. And it's case of, there's only probably 2 occasions per year where that would be an issue.
And I think the difficulty, the challenge is and where we have let ourselves down is the lack of destination charging. I mean, it's so much cheaper to put in destination chargers than it is to put in the big rapid chargers on services. Having 40 bays in a car park with chargers is a lot cheaper than having 3-4 bar bays in the car park with fast chargers. And if you're going to a destination, you're likely to stay there. It's not. You don't do a 100-mile trip, turn around and come back again. You do a 100-mile trip, stop somewhere, and then come back. And if you could charge during that time you were stationary, even at 7 kilowatts, you would get a lot of charging, probably enough to get your 100-mile journey back. So it's that lack of destination charging, which is a potential problem. And we lost that investment. We had some of that investment early on. It wasn't followed through, and as I said, the maintenance wasn't done, and that's been a problem. So I think that's an area I'd like to see possibly more government funding on, not on the capital investment, but actually on the revenue investment to make sure that the councils actually do maintain some of the stuff they own. And we're also seeing councils putting the price of those charges up astronomically, even more than they should be going up. But that's to cover their maintenance costs.
Yeah, I mean, on-street charges are horrific. I mean, they are just the amount they're asking for when you park your car and you plug it into a lamppost. It seems to be just. I mean, I wouldn't say on a par with gasoline, but it's a lot more than when I plug it into my house. That's for sure.
Oh yeah. But I think it's certainly the case that we have a situation now where it's getting to the point where electricity on the road is getting equivalent with diesel and petrol. If you had to charge on the road all the time in certain places, you can still find cheap charging. I still find cheap charging on the road, and certain deals are out there which can reduce the cost down dramatically. But equally, if you've got a long enough car with a decent range on it, you can just plug into a 13-pin plug when you get to the other end as well. If you can find a one outside the house or whatever. I mean, obviously, I wouldn't plug into an extension lead. But,
yeah, I mean that's basically my plan for mine is there's only one destination I can think of where that's not going to be possible, and that's in Norfolk. But in Wales, pretty sure we'd better just plug into a 3-pin thing and leave it going for 2 days. And that'd be fine.
Yeah. And Norfolk's actually getting quite good for chargers now. They actually are investing there. Lovely destinations are the one place where I think we're going to see some real investment in chargers.
I'll let you know how I get on this year.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, well, I think it's interesting for me, though. Just like I said, early stages, so I'm probably not going to do it until maybe this time next year. But it gives me from the summer onwards, at least time to go and play and do some test drives and see what's out there and keep my eye on the new models then, and then see what I can do.
And think of the keyboards and gizmos you can buy with the money you'll save on leasing.
Exactly. I've got space for another Korg Symphony, I'm sure. Well, I've made so much.
Say it quietly.
Yeah, well, yeah, I'm just checking. I've got space. Somewhere. So I have got my eye on something else, but I think I'll have to wait. I'm really enjoying the one I've got now. So just focus. Do the one thing.
Focus.
Yeah, do the one thing. Do one thing properly. That's my plan. Well. That's just about everything we've got time for this week. So I really enjoyed that. So it was good to catch up again. So I'll include the links to the topics in our show notes and the Spotify and iTunes links, everything else. If you want to have a listen, actually, I'll play out with the first track of the new album as well. So have a listen, and I've got to go now do some 1983 Tangerine Dream for the rest of the family. Come and listen to this, everybody. I'm sure they can't wait.
They'll be so pleased.
Yeah. So where can we find you, Gary, on your channel?
You can find me on YouTube on EV Owner, which doesn't have many posts recently, but I have got an absolutely massive video I'm editing at the moment, which will go on, which is sort of like my first year with my new EV6, some trials and tribulations and some of the really positive things about it. But in fact, I've never really had to charge it on the road much.
Excellent. And Rich, I'll just include the links because you're somewhere on Mastodon.
I am indeed.
Yeah. Great. Well, we're back same time, same place next week. You can email me in@thislife.com. I'm @isticks on Twitter. See you next week.
Okay.